You have these two political movements, right?
Mm,
And their ancestors literally killed each other for, well, basically 8 centuries.
yeah, 800 years. It's not a minor rivalry.
Right, exactly. We are talking about deep generational trauma here. Like wars, famines, insurrections, Irish ethno-nationalists on one side and British loyalists on the other.
For hundreds of years, those two factions have been defined entirely by their uh, absolute violent opposition to one another.
Totally. But today, if you look at their digital footprints, they're practically sharing a cubicle,
It's wild. They're running the exact same playbook.
pushing identical narratives, targeting the exact same institutions. It's a total subversion of historical logic.
Yeah, it really forces us to completely throw out the old geographic maps of political rivalry. The borders have just,
The
vanished.
historical context has been completely muted.
Exactly. And now these historic enemies are suddenly fighting shoulder to shoulder in the exact same digital trench.
Which is exactly the optical illusion we are navigating today. So, welcome to today's deep dive.
About the Machiavellian lens, burning the institutions, two sides same coin, the progressive camouflage, weaponizing faith, and finally, the global paradox. So let's just get right to it.
First up, Section 1, the Machiavellian Lens, a framework for modern power.
To really make sense of our primary case study here, an Irish online commentator named Adrian Logan, the text suggests we have to completely set aside standard political labels. Instead, we need to view his actions strictly through Machiavelli's strategic theories. The source defines a core concept running through Logan's content: anarcho-populism. Now, what does that mean? It's basically the strategic dismantling of public trust in stabilizing institutions in order to overthrow the existing order. The text uses this overarching strategy to explain why populist figures have to paint local authorities as entirely evil. Think about it. If an institution is just flawed, well, it can be fixed. But if it's painted as irredeemably corrupt, the audience stays hooked. They keep demanding a radical alternative media savior.
Moving on to Section 2, burning the institutions, dehumanizing the protectors.
The text argues that Logan's relentless campaign against the An Garda Síochána, which is the Irish police force, isn't just some random anger. No, it's actually a deliberate Machiavellian tactic. The goal is to completely erase the societal utility of institutions and hyper-focus entirely on systemic failures. By treating the Garda like they're just this corrupt puppet state, the text points out that Logan completely ignores their vital everyday stabilizing work in places like County Cavan. He essentially creates a selective blind spot because, acknowledging that ordinary police officers are out there tackling violent crime or protecting vulnerable citizens, that would totally ruin the narrative of absolute despair that he desperately needs to fuel his platform. Okay, Section 3. Two sides, same coin. The algorithmic syndicate.
Now, the text shifts to this really fascinating comparative matrix. It reveals how Logan and the British loyalist commentator Tommy Robinson actually operate. Historically speaking, their political factions are fierce enemies, but structurally, they share the exact same playbook. Look at their targets. Both of them fiercely attack their respective local police forces. And the rhetoric? Both claim the system is fundamentally broken and just needs to be burned down. What about their alternative? Well, both offer this entirely abstract, fictional nationalist utopia. They manufacture absolute institutional despair to sell the exact same fantasy. It's just wrapped up in different national flags.
And honestly, it goes way deeper than just their structure. The text outlines that their talking points, things like the Great Replacement, or mocking diversity initiatives as the inclusion police, or rallying against globalist elites, these aren't just random coincidences. The source argues this is a highly optimized, downloaded software package. It really doesn't matter if it was originally coded in London or Washington. It's utilized locally because the global digital ecosystem consistently rewards this exact script with massive views and engagement.
Which naturally leads us to this incredible paradox. How did historic enemies end up sharing the exact same script? The source highlights this wild reality. Two groups whose ancestors fought a literal blood feud for generations are now teaming up online. Machiavelli would probably say, "The enemy of my enemy is my utility." They're pooling their rhetorical resources against a centralized foe, like the EU and progressive inclusion policies. Why? Because a fragmented, localized fight against massive structures like that is simply a losing battle.
Which brings us to Section 4, the progressive camouflage, the illusion of Santa Marin.
To understand Logan's bizarre, highly contradictory use of imagery featuring the former progressive Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin, the text points us straight to this classic quote from Machiavelli's The Prince. He advises that a leader absolutely must be a master of illusion. You have to surround yourself with symbols of virtue to mask your true operations. Basically, you must desire to appear upright, even if your actual actions are anything but.
The source calls this the logical void. Let's break it down. On one side, Sanna Marin's legacy is built on robust state institutions, European integration, and progressive social equality. But on the other side, Logan's daily reality is preaching institutional arson and actively attacking inclusion. So the text concludes that Marin isn't his ideological guide at all. She's merely a stolen cloaking device, an alibi, really, to mask his far-right tactics from his audience. It is pure, 100% political theater.
All right, Section 5, Weaponizing Faith, the Divine Alibi.
So, what happens when progressive camouflage fails? Well, the text notes a distinct pivot to hijacking Christian theology for public mobilization. According to Machiavelli, there is literally no tool more powerful than claiming your worldly ambitions are mandated by God. To the political strategist, religion isn't about private salvation at all. It's about absolute public mobilization. The text emphasizes that framing an aggressive political agenda as a divine mandate acts as this infallible, untouchable shield against critics. Because suddenly, if you criticize the commentator, you're criticizing their faith.
But the text points out a massive contradiction here, calling it the theological inversion. Think about it. The foundational message of the Gospels is rooted in radical inclusion and the rejection of earthly power. Conversely, the populist doctrine relies on tribal survival, exclusion, and institutional warfare. The explainer really highlights how a historical message of universal empathy gets completely twisted by these commentators to justify cultivating deep societal division.
Mapping this out, we see both creators actively utilizing this divine alibi. Tommy Robinson frames his movement as defending a Christian nation under siege, specifically to fuel street-level anxiety. Meanwhile, Adrian Logan uses spiritual phrasing to dodge critical exposés and justify tearing down institutions. Ultimately, the text argues that both men are acting as merchants of validation. They're telling their audiences that their destructive anger isn't just politically justified, it is genuinely holy.
And finally, Section 6, the Global Nationalist Paradox, Public Theater versus Private Alignment.
This brings us to the source text's ultimate realization about modern independent media, the economy of outrage. The text argues that the vast majority of this content, we're talking about 85% of it, is fueled by globalized culture war narratives. Only a tiny fraction, maybe 15%, is actually based on authentic local grievances. In their public theater, these commentators preach strict local isolationism. But behind the screen, their survival is overwhelmingly dependent on feeding the global algorithmic beast with internationally recognized talking points.
And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate Machiavellian irony of the modern digital age. To fight globalism, local ethno-nationalists have had to completely internationalize their movement. It's wild, right? The very people demanding closed borders and pure national identities are utterly addicted to transnational networks to tell them what to say next. Why? Simply because that is exactly what the algorithm rewards.
And so, the source leaves us with this final, highly provocative thought. If Niccolo Machiavelli were analyzing this landscape today, he'd see that principles are often just illusions used for camouflage, and historical trauma, it's simply currency used to buy attention. When you strip away the national flags, the stolen progressive imagery, and the religious armor, and you just look at the raw mechanics of the digital algorithm, who is really pulling the strings? What should you take away from all this? Well, the next time you see a fiery online political rant, ask yourself, are you watching a genuine movement, or are you just watching the Machiavellian matrix at work? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this structured look completely changes how you view the digital battleground.